War. War never changes.
Some kind of war junkie?
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Welcome to the War 102 podcast, where we explore the doctrine, theory, philosophy, and history of warfare. I'm your guide, Paul Darling, and I want to share what I learned in nearly 30 years in uniform. So let's get to learning about the most influential activity in human history, war. Welcome to episode 11, Seapower. For the infantryman, getting there is most of the suck. And from earliest times all the way to today, ships and boats have provided the best means to, in the words of Nathan Bedford Forrest, get there first with the most men. But not just men, supplies, anything. Ships move lots of stuff, very far, relatively quickly, and with the minimum amount of manpower and investment. All these things are relative, of course. Ships are expensive to build and expensive to maintain, but their long life and vast capacity make the initial investments, obviously, quite worth it. Ships sail the open seas, but ultimately, only to get from one piece of land to another. As soon as the first boat was cobbled together, not long after, bandits, or as they are known afloat, pirates, cobbled another one together to take the first. For ships are limited to how much they can carry. You can carry lots of men or lots of supplies, but not both. And a ship with lots of supplies, provided it isn't faster, was helpless against one with lots of men. And ships designed for fighting needed different things than ships designed for hauling cargo. Etymology time, cargo comes from the Latin meaning to load. I start with this almost childish explanation of the earliest moments of sailing to show how, like land power, we have been fighting at sea as long as we have been at sea. Sea power means, in its simplest form, the freedom to navigate the sea as sovereign, without interference. And this means you must have a war-fighting navy. Not just a ship, not just a few ships, but enough ships to protect what is yours and threaten those who threaten you. And to have that many ships demands far more than is initially thought of. You need shipyards to build them, dry docks to build and repair. You need ports for refueling and emergency repair. You need access to the fuel demanded, not an issue in the time of sail, admittedly. You need naval architects. You need schools to train your mariners. You need warfighting ships. You need supply ships for your warfighting ships. You need repair ships. Being a sea power country is a massive investment. And if you want to be a big boy country, an imperial country, you need sea power. And if you want sea power, you basically need an empire. There's definitely a chicken and egg thing going on here. When it comes to sea power and understanding it, no name comes close to Alfred Thayer Mahan. Side note time, Alfred Mahan's father, Dennis, was a longtime professor at my alma mater, West Point. In fact, the engineering building there is named after Dennis Mahan. Alfred's middle name, Thayer, came from the so-called father of West Point, Sylvanus Thayer, and Alfred was born at West Point. It takes a West Pointer to understand sea power is the obvious conclusion. Mahan's book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, published in 1890, was arguably the most influential book written on warfare in history, certainly within the late 19th and well into the 20th century. It shaped Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet. Mahan and Roosevelt were friends. And the development of the United States as a global empire. The Spanish-American War was as much created by Mahan's book as any other single factor. The aforementioned need of ports to support your fleet, granted by the acquisition of the former Spanish colonies throughout the Pacific following the war. Kaiser Wilhelm II ordered his officers to read Mahan's book. Not his naval officers, all his officers. He believed, not inaccurately, that as long as newly unified Germany lacked sea power, they would always be a lesser nation, and that could not be tolerated. Panama as a nation exists because the Panama Canal was necessary for sea power. Back to Mahan, and they don't even celebrate his birthday as a national holiday. A tragedy. The Japanese embarked upon the rapid creation of an impressive navy. Their success in the Russo-Japanese War is much a testament to Mahan's influence as any other factor. Mahan laid out why you needed to be a sea power, what you needed to be a sea power, and how to be a sea power. I reiterate, You cannot overstate how influential Mahan was at the turn of the century. And had he stopped there, we would have been good. But as great as Mahan was, he really wasn't a historian. He was a powerful writer and forceful advocate. He was a disciple, like most of his late 19th century compatriots, of that great theorist from the Napoleonic Wars, Antoine Yamini. You thought I was going to say Clausewitz, didn't you? Yamini was the king of operational theory. He may still be. But this left him somewhat short on actual strategy and certainly policy. Mahan originally wrote to develop a series of lectures for the Naval Academy, from which he graduated second in his class. The origins of his book were for naval officers, and as such, they would have greatly benefited. But his reach far exceeded that. The weakness of Mahan is that he looked at naval warfare independently and in a somewhat dialectic ideal, where the ultimate objective is the complete destruction of your enemy's fleet first. Once command of the sea has been obtained through this decisive battle, then all else naturally follows. So for Mahan, the critical naval strategy was to mass your ships and keep your fleet together and strong as possible. Hunt down the opposing fleet and destroy them through superior firepower and mass. No economy of force here. Not much surprise. You can check the blocks on mass and unity of command. Not much Sun Tzu going on, however. Subtlety is lacking. But that is okay. The failure here is that operationally and from a strictly naval perspective, the objective, destruction of the naval fleet, is clear. The problem stems in that Seapower and command of the sea, at the strategic and policy level, is but a means. The ends are always to move things from one place to another. So while your fleet is massed and hunting the enemy's fleet, your supply ships move unprotected, your sea lines of communication unsecured. In fact, while you hunt down your enemy's fleet, you really can't do anything else. And your enemy may decline your decisive battle. In fact, he should. The push for bigger and more powerful ships to be the cornerstone of this decisive naval battle led to the amazingly fast development of ever and ever larger battleships. Side note, there has never been, and will never be, a better named ship than Dreadnought. The Royal Navy may no longer rule the waves, but they will always rule the naming of warships. And with that clumsy segue, we have to address the other tragically largely forgotten giant of naval theory, Sir Julian Stafford Corbett. His modestly titled book, Some Principles of Maritime Strategy, published in 1911, was based upon his lectures at the Royal Navy's Naval War College, and his lectures and book were hugely influential with the Royal Navy in general, and more specifically, Corbett's friend, First Sea Lord Jackie Fisher. A little on Corbett. He wasn't a naval officer. He wasn't an officer. He was a rich Englishman, voracious student, gifted writer, and astute strategist. His lack of commissioned credentials made him a target of endless ad hominem criticisms that he just didn't understand. Oh, but he did. He understood the power of limited conflict, of maintaining ships, and if necessary, the avoidance of battle to further the greater strategic and policy objectives of sea control, as opposed to the more absolute sea power. Sea control can be very simplistically defined as controlling that part of the sea as is necessary for the accomplishment of the greater policy or strategy of the nation as a whole. If you want to invade France from England, you need control the English Channel, not the Indian Ocean. Corbett drew heavily from Clausewitz, and not just from Book 1, Chapter 1. He admittedly drew what was best from Yamini as well, and weighing his own historical analysis, created some original, brilliant insights as well. Intuitively, if two sides seek a decisive battle, one side will win and one side will lose. And if you draw from Clausewitz and his paradoxical trinity, if both sides think they can win this battle, both sides could very well lose it. Conversely, it is intuitively obvious to the casual observer that if one side will unquestionably win and the other is destined to lose, then it would be the height of foolishness for the latter to engage in that decisive battle. Taken a bit further, maintain the fleet or fleets as necessary to achieve the overarching strategy of logistically moving the requisite forces and supplies, or denying the requisite forces and supplies of your enemy. Avoid the decisive battle and focus on your policy objectives and their supporting strategies. Control that part of the sea you need for the period of time that you need to, and preserve your fleets to allow you to do so indefinitely. There is a saying that he who is strong everywhere is strong nowhere. The corollary to that is he who is strong in one place is weak everywhere else. Mahan saw the first. Corbett valued the second. This is not to diminish the impact, importance, or brilliance of Mahan. In the but 20 years separating the two men's books, technology progressed immensely fast, particularly the submarine. The United States Navy from World War I onward, while benefiting from the logistics and policy prescriptions of Mahan, wisely drew their operational concepts from Corbett, as did, obviously, the Royal Navy. The Japanese failed to do so, and much of their failures, navally speaking, in World War II, was their steadfast adherence to Mahan, that spoke so well to their culture of Bushido on both land and sea. Pearl Harbor did little, in retrospect, to weaken America's overall capacity to wage war on the Pacific Ocean, but did much to motivate the requisite outrage of the American people. For example, the Japanese always saw the submarine as a support vessel to the great fleets of the Japanese Navy, and rather the massive and ultimately outdated before they sailed Yamato-class battleships, indecisive, never firing their massive 18-inch guns until near the end of the war, when it was ignobly sunk by waves of aircraft, despite being the cornerstone of the Imperial Japanese Navy's maritime strategy. The Americans had large ocean-going submarines operating independently and decimating the Japanese shipping fleets, which were the center of gravity of Japanese home island manufacturing and logistics. The Japanese never really utilized convoys or convoy escorts to protect their shipping, as this would violate both Bushido and the Mahanian mandate to keep the fleet together always and at all times. How'd that work out for him? Fundamentally, Corbett accurately saw that you can never control the sea as you do land, that any control of the sea is transitory and temporary. So control what you must when you must. This isn't to deny the importance of the sea. Rather, it correctly defines it as a separate domain, inherently different, requiring different men, equipment, operational concepts, and strategic thinking. Much as the submarine and airplane changed naval warfare in the 20th century, so too have modern anti-ship missiles in the 21st. Captain Wayne Hughes' book, Fleet Tactics, helped to codify the basics of naval conflict in the modern era, to vastly oversimplify it. Be the first to fire accurately. The level of firepower that modern missiles provide make nearly all ships sinkable by a single shot from a single missile. So find, fix, and destroy becomes far more deadly. And with modern missile guidance, even fix is optional. To be found within range of a good missile leaves a high probability of being destroyed. And this concept drives home the most critical difference between naval conflict and land warfare. As mentioned earlier, the defense has the inherent advantage on land. You hold land, you shape it, you ensconce yourself in its folds and fields. The psychology of knowing that you need not move, and you will defend this piece of ground relatively safe in the embrace of Mother Earth. Poseidon will tolerate no such nonsense. You must move at sea. You must strike first and strike hard. All is to the attacker. The offensive supreme, which makes the find aspect that much more critical. For to be found first is to be attacked first, which puts you at a horrific disadvantage. The safety is found in the expanses of the oceans. You cannot hide. The speed of your ships expanding time and space. There is nothing to hold, so you move. Move to avoid, or move to find and destroy. This psychology was fixed in the surface community, which served as the father of all navies, but now comprises one of three main communities in modern navies. But this attitude permeates all naval officers, regardless what tribe they serve in. You have the air wing, both sea-based and those land-based aircraft dedicated to naval warfare. You have the surface warfare community, operating the various ships and fleets afloat, and you have the submarine force, itself split into two very distinct communities, attack submarines and nuclear ballistic missile submarines. In an interesting and yet again simplistic twist on rock, paper, scissors, aircraft kill submarines, submarines kill surface ships, and surface ships kill aircraft. This isn't to say that anti-submarine warfare can't be done by surface ships and other submarines, but this is more defensive in nature, as they lack the range and speed to find the most stealthy of warfighting machines. Attack submarines can kill other submarines if they can find them, but in the almost incalculable size of the three-dimensional oceans in which they operate, this can be exceedingly difficult, unless catching them in known transit areas or straight out of port. The fine portion being best executed, especially in the littoral shallows where many submarines operate, by aircraft. And the ballistic missile submarines are ironically a better discussion for next week's topic, air power. In this all too brief introduction to the rich and fascinating subject of naval warfare and theory, much has been neglected to later, after we go over our final dedicated domain discussion, as just noted, air power. Thanks for joining us today. If you liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, rate, and comment. Most importantly, share with your friends. Join the conversation at the War 102 subreddit, and check out the War 102 Buzzsprout website for links to more information and supporting videos. Send me an email at war102podcast@gmail.com. I look forward to your comments and hope you join us again next week. See you then.